You probably think that you have complete control over your actions when it comes to politics. I know I do. However, I want to talk to you today about the role that multi-billion-dollar companies and data firms play in controlling US elections, and how digital political advertisements are going to be more pervasive than ever in the 2020 election cycle. The world of political digital advertisements is blowing up, with an estimated $1.2 billion predicted to be spent in 2020 alone. And while the majority of ads are still going to be through television, a growing number every year are through the digital media. And this is for good reason. I'm going to be talking about how digital ads were used in 2016, how they were used in the midterm elections, and then some of the progress that is happening in the digital ad world since then. In 2016, digital ads were still seen in their infant stage in the United States. In 2008, Obama used Facebook ads to target voters for the first time in US political history, kind of revolutionizing the idea of what a political ad is. Then in 2013, data was used to pull off an upset election in Trinidad and Tobago, where data firms targeted younger voters to abstain from voting. This allowed a minority party to win after younger voters left the polls, declining youth voter turnout by 40% and voter turnout as a whole by 6%. In 2015, Brexit happened. This time, this upset was on a much more national scale, and people were looking for an answer. The answer would not be given until after the 2016 election, when Donald Trump pulled off another upset. And the firm that was behind all three of these elections was called Cambridge Analytica. Before I really dig in to how Cambridge Analytica used data in a groundbreaking way, it's important to note that the methods that they used are still very inconclusive, and there's a lot of controversy over whether they really worked as well as they were claimed to have worked or not. However, what I will say is that regardless of how effective they were, they definitely laid the groundwork for how political ads were used in the 2018 elections and how they will be used in 2020. In 2016, Cambridge Analytica went after American citizens on Facebook, paying some users to take a personality quiz. Through that, they got around 270,000 people to take this personality quiz and agree to have some of their personal data looked through. What the users did not realize, though, is that Cambridge Analytica, who was running this personality quiz, was going to strip all of their data and also all of their friends' data. So in total, Cambridge Analytica actually got access to 50 million American Facebook profiles. Cambridge Analytica then used results from the personality quizzes to create a model of the American voter. They then took information that they found on each person's profile and categorized them based on their political leanings and how likely or not they were to vote. They then used this data to target specific voters with specific advertisements that they thought those voters would respond well to. They wanted to be able to identify safe, likely, and lean voters, but more importantly, they wanted to be able to identify voters that they thought might be persuadable or that might be able to swing the election. And then when they found those voters, they would go in on them with lots of ads. This revolutionized the industry of political ads because now instead of having to blanket advertise with expensive TV, they were able to just plaster a ton of political advertisements online. And digital ads are a lot cheaper, and that's part of the appeal to them. Now I'm going to talk about a case study that was done in the Alabama Senate election, and the data revealed in 2018 sort of shows how effective digital advertising can be. So what happened was David Goldstein saw what happened in 2016, and as a Democrat, he was concerned. So we got a group of people together who would create this ecosystem of advertisements. He raised $85,000, and all he needed was an election. And then the Alabama special election happened, with Doug Jones facing off against Roy Moore. And because this race was seen as so close, it was the perfect place to test out his new digital advertising. So what would happen is he would target voters in a similar way that Cambridge Analytica did, and when they would click on an advertisement, it would bring them into this ecosystem of advertisements catered to getting them to do the desired effect. So if they were Democrat, they wanted them to turn out and vote for Doug Jones, and if they were Republican, they wanted them to either write in another candidate or stay home. And at the end of this experiment, with only $85,000 spent on advertising, Democratic turnout was said to have been 4% higher in the 2 counties that he advertised in versus the 2 counties which were just the controls. Republican turnout on the moderate end was around 2.5% lower, and strong Republican turnout was 4.5% lower. And this is a significantly larger amount than what the general consensus is for the field swing, or just the general swing in an election if you have a lot of door knocking and canvassing and advertising going on. So this shows that digital advertising can be extremely effective. Now, I'll note, of course, looking at 2 counties and 2 control counties and trying to stake an entire, effectiveness of digital campaigning is not extremely reliable, but it does provide some amount of evidence that digital advertising is extremely effective. Since 2008 and 2016, the draw of political advertising stays pretty much the same. It's cheap, easy to use, and really innovative, meaning you can test out advertisements and you can see specifically how voters respond to each one, and then you can keep honing in on the advertisements that perform extremely well. So because it's so much cheaper to advertise in places like Facebook, Google, and YouTube, political campaigns can test out different ads and then move them onto television as the election season nears. But immediately we can see how this sort of harmless testing of how effective a digital advertisement can be can turn extremely sour. Facebook and other tech companies have analytics to show exactly which people are responding to exactly which advertisements, and they have the ability to interpret what that means. Another thing to mention just before we really dig into it is that the online advertising world is extremely unregulated. Some organizations and advertisements don't even have to label who is paying for it, and this really affects how people will interpret an advertisement. Because if you see something that is paid for by an oil lobby versus an environmental lobby, you're going to interpret it a lot differently. But when you're just seeing political content and you don't know who's supporting it, you really don't have any basis on how to gauge it. Now, both of these quotes that I'm about to read, I think, do a really good job of contextualizing and explaining the current landscape of digital ads in America. All of these developments are taking place, moreover, within a regulatory structure that is weak and largely ineffectual, posing daunting challenges to policymakers. The next one is, in the upcoming 2020 elections, the U.S. is likely to witness an extremely hard-fought, under-the-radar, innovative, and in many ways disturbing set of races, not only for the White House, but also for down-ballot candidates and other issue groups. Essentially, what is being said here is that the current environment is conducive to having complex and unknown micro-targeting ad campaigns that greatly influence public opinion without public knowledge. And data firms are only building on the methods that were used in 2016 to be even more effective now. They are finding new ways to profile and target voters, and really we don't know exactly what they're capable of because their methods are only revealed after each election cycle. And as somebody from Cambridge Analytica said, these data companies are looking for a way to manipulate you and warp your perception about the world. It is true that tech companies have been becoming increasingly transparent after large public scrutiny. Twitter is no longer promoting political advertisements. Google is no longer allowing such complex micro-targeting analytics, and Facebook is actually limiting the extent to which they will help political campaigns find the right targets for their ads. But a lot of this is just being employed in ways to maintain good PR without really bringing about any significant change. Facebook and Google, for example, are limiting their own micro-targeting and data learning systems. However, they're not prohibiting political campaigns from bringing in third-party data firms that can get the exact same and even more complex things done. There are positives to ways that data is being used to micro-target voters. So, in 2018, AOC and her young and tech-savvy staff were able to use data and advertisements on digital platforms to target younger and Hispanic voters, two groups of people who don't traditionally turn out to the polls. And then she was able to win in an upset victory against a longtime incumbent. However, there are a lot of negatives as well. Just as advertisements can be used to enhance voter turnout, they can also be used to suppress voter turnout, targeting women and minority groups especially. So before I leave, I want to give you my opinion on how digital advertising is being used in political campaigns right now. My opinion is that, okay, so if somebody goes to the ballot box and votes for a candidate, ultimately it's their choice. However, because they don't know what's going on, they have no idea of the systematic targeting and persuasion techniques that are being utilized on them, and it turns into something much more shady and leaning into this ethical gray area. It seems to compromise the idea of what an individual is and that US citizens have their own sovereignty. And it seems to turn us more into a population body that can be strategically manipulated by whichever political party has the most advanced data targeting techniques. And right now it's the Republican Party, but next election cycle it might be the Democratic Party, and the next election cycle it may be even a foreign government. And we need to start having honest conversations with ourselves about how powerful digital advertising is, because no one wants to admit they're vulnerable, but we really don't know how far-reaching this goes. So I would implore you to just be mindful of any political advertisements that you see online, and remember that everything has a very calculated agenda behind it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please make sure to like and subscribe, and also comment any video ideas or critiques that you have, because I'm just starting out this channel and it'd be really nice and helpful to hear. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.